Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. Today, I want to do a video where I talk to a friend of mine, Bob, who's been investing for over 20 years. Bob invested before and during the housing crash of 2008 and has a significant portfolio, around 260 rental units. I want to ask a couple of questions of Bob, who, as a side note, has been completely blind since he was around 20. So basically, his entire investing life was done without sight. And so I might have some questions about that. But most important to me, I want to know, Bob, what got you interested in real estate?
Well, thank you first of all, thank you for having me on your show. What got me interested in real estate was when I moved out and lived on my own. I really didn't want to pay rent. That was kind of a long time ago, and just the fear of paying rent and kind of seemed to me like it was a waste of money. So I actually bought my first piece of real estate. It was a small mobile home on its own separate parcel, and it was owner financing, and I lived there. And then after I moved away to go to college, I rented it out, and then I subsequently sold it, as I didn't move back to that community after I graduated from college. And then as I moved along, I picked up another property here and there, lived in it, and then moved on and sold and continued to rent it after I moved out. And then I ended up getting involved in self-employment and kind of got sidetracked with that, and then started a family. And then in about 2003, 2004 timeframe, I got back involved heavy in real estate.
So if you got involved and started heavy in 2003, 2004, that was a time where lending was very easy. Seemed like it was a lot easier to get lending done. What happened to your whole portfolio around 2008? What did it look like? How many rentals did you have, and what happened with rents?
From around 2003 to 2008, we had built the portfolio up to about, I think it was around 50 units, and the rents in our community were fairly stable. 2008, once the Great Recession started and got going in earnest, I think the rents fairly stabilized. They were up and down, but they were fairly stable as people were having to as they were getting foreclosed on, and then they were forced into the rental field market. There was a point in time where there was a lot of demand, but it subsequently it kind of faded a little bit as people doubled up, moved back with mom and dad, etc. So prior to the Great Recession, as you mentioned, lending was fairly easy. You could get a lot more mortgages than you can now. I think we at one time had 60 mortgages altogether. But we used some portfolio lenders as well. And once the Great Recession started, it became very difficult to get financing. Banks were very leery about real estate, especially investors that had a lot of properties. So it took a little while as we worked out of the Great Recession for banks to get comfortable again and invest to lenders. And then there was a cap on how many you could actually have, and we had already surpassed that cap. So it was a little difficult for us to get mortgages in the 2011, 12, 13 when the prices were really attractive.
That's one of the things that a lot of new investors kind of get wrong mentally. They think when there's a housing crash, I'll go buy a bunch of stuff. And that's when the lenders disappeared. We kind of skipped over a part there. Starting 2003, 2004 to 2008, you get around 50 units. How does that happen?
We had a couple of small multifamily, a couple of duplexes. I was attracted to duplexes. I thought that the more units you could get under one door, the better you'd be. Financing was good. They were easy to rent. There's a lot to be said about the duplexes. I liked the concept of a duplex property over single family home over larger multifamilies. Is also what we could afford at the time. So we did that as funding would become available. Like I said, I was self-employed, so we had some availability to financial resources. We pretty much funded the properties on our own. Typically, they were 20% down, 80% financed. Prices in the early 2003, 2004, they were still relatively affordable, and the numbers typically usually they made sense. Actually in that time frame, we get pretty close to the 1% in our community, the 1% rule. And then in 2004, we came upon a 20-unit apartment complex. It was textbook off-market deal where we drove past it every day on our way home. And they put out a little sign, probably the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, handwritten, for sale. It didn't look very good. It was kind of a rundown little 20-unit apartment building, but it was on 5 acres and it had a lot of potential. And finally, I called and I talked to the property manager there. They lived on site. I mean, like I said, it was textbook. Went back and forth, and finally, Jane, talking to her, she goes, "Well," and the sellers they lived about 60 miles away. They were totally hands off, and they finally talking to her. They wanted $1 million for it, and she goes, "Well, I know what they'll take." And it's like, how can I get her to tell me what they'll take without sounding too anxious? So finally, she told me that they take $900,000. So dummy me, what did I do? I offered $900,000. So make a long story short, we ended up landing at about $912,500 for the property, and anyway, we refinanced it a couple of times, and just before COVID, or right about the time COVID started, we refinanced it for $1.8 million. So we've got all of our money out, and then some, and it's still cash flows because we now have. I think the interest rate's around 3.75. That's how it kind of got really rolling in 2004. How we financed that property is we refinanced our house. We also had at the time we still do actually, we had a second home, and we refinanced both of them to get the down payment money. So I want to think we needed about $250 or maybe $275 to pull that one off. And so with our primary and our second home, we were able to get the proceeds out of that. So that's kind of a true zero down, because even though it's really not zero down, it kind of is. We didn't have to come out with anything out of our bank account.
Okay, so that's what got you through 2008 up to, and then you refinanced just before COVID. You said, and pulled out money.
Right.
What was COVID like for you? Because before we hit record today, you said that there was 2 buying opportunities. How did COVID turn into a buying opportunity for you?
Yep. Well, over the past 20 years, there's been 2 really, really good buying opportunities. And one of them was, as we just mentioned, right after the Great Recession, 2009, 10, 11, 12. And that was geared towards price and a lot of availability and not a lot of competition, because not only the banks, but a lot of investors lost a lot. They went out of business. So there wasn't a lot of competition. So it was all about price. You could get really, really good. And even in my market, it was not as dramatic as some of the other markets. I mean, Phoenix and Tampa and Florida. So those were really good markets to buy super low. The prices were really good, but the financing was difficult. Banks were very conservative in their lending practices, and then as we kind of pulled through the recession and we started growing, and a lot of growth, slow growth through the Obama administration and up through the Trump administration, it just was a slow growth period for real estate, but it kept going and going and going. And then we got into the COVID, and for the first maybe month, everything was on pause. Didn't know what was going to happen. Could have all collapsed, and people were like, you didn't have to pay rent, and we weren't sure what was really going to happen. But after maybe April, and you go into May, it turned into just a great buying opportunity. And that buying opportunity was all about the interest rates. The lenders are interested in lending money, keeping the economy going. The Federal Reserve was buying all the mortgage-backed securities, and so it was a great time to borrow. You probably heard before, Dion, that the asset's not necessarily the property; it's the 30-year fixed mortgage, and that's what the case was in early 2021 and 20 in the first part of 2022.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why I don't see a housing crash coming anytime soon, is because so many people locked down 3.5% interest for 30 years on their houses, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, and so there's just no inventory.
What I don't hear a lot of people talking about is that everybody's fearful of a recession, but one of the reasons why we may not have a recession is because all those people that refinance their homes and they have 2.75, 3.5 interest rates, they have about $1,000 a month more of disposable income than the renters and the people who bought homes in 2023. And that's a massive amount of people that did that. And those people all have more disposable income. So they're in a really good position. They've got disposable income that will keep this economy going. I don't hear too many economists talking about that, but in my opinion, I think that we're going to be in good shape and we're not going to go into a deep recession. That's one of the main reasons.
No, I totally agree. And one of the weird things about different recessions is most of us think of 2008, it was a recession and housing crash, almost like the housing crash caused the recession. But 4 out of the last 6 recessions, home prices went up. So just because we could have a recession doesn't mean home values are going to go down. They're almost unrelated in most cases. Couple of quick questions that I know people are going to ask me in the comments that I usually start with. Where is the majority of your properties at? What market do you invest in?
The majority of ours are in the Olympia, Washington, Thurston County area, 60 miles south of Seattle and 100 miles north of Portland, Oregon. We're on the I-5 corridor.
That's pretty much where I invest. I'm in Thurston and Pierce, and my most recent purchase is out here in Kitsap County. I like the market. I have some friends who invest out of state because they want a cheaper market. I kind of like the more expensive market because with less properties, I can have better margins that creates better cash flow. Your wife told me that during your investing, you have mentored several younger investors to get them started into real estate. So one of the questions I'll wrap up with is, if somebody was going to start investing in real estate today, 2024, what would you tell them to do to start?
Well, there'd be quite a few things. Number one is start early. Don't wait for the perfect time to buy. If I could have bought in 2014 and 15 and 16, I would have, but I had too many mortgages, and I probably should have turned to commercial sooner and bought multi-family units. But so number one is don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect buying time. Get involved. There's lots of different strategies that you can get involved. So spend time listening to shows like this, doing a little bit of education, educate yourself. It's free. So do that. I think one of the things that helped me is I'm very proficient using 6th grade math. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then percentages, fractions, and decimals. And it's all you need in real estate. If you're good at those, and fractions, decimals, and percentages, they're all the same thing, just presented in a different way. So that's all you need in real estate. Just do the math, and that'll tell you what to do. It's not for everybody. I have some associates, some contacts that they own some rental properties, and they just hate it. They don't like dealing with the tenants. They don't like getting phone calls, and it's not for them. So figure out kind of what your tolerance for level is, and but probably I would recommend a new investor early in life to house hack. So buy a duplex. I have 3 kids. 2 of them I helped get duplexes, and my daughter lives in one side and rents out the other side, so she's doing fine. And my son, he never actually moved into the duplex, so he has it. He's renting it out, and so I'd house hack. You can buy a 4-plex. I'd recommend that.
I love it. That house hacking thing is something I often recommend to almost everybody, especially that since November of last year, Fannie and Freddie have mortgaged, backed mortgages of 5% down on up to 4-plexes. So this is almost a perfect time to jump into house hacking. And I know people are going to have follow-up questions. What we'll do is in the comments below, the people who are watching this video, leave questions that you would like to ask of Bob. And if I can, I'd like to invite him back on in a few weeks or in a month to answer those questions. Bob, I can't thank you enough. And also, I want to thank you for giving me the title of the video. It's often hard on YouTube to come up with creative ways, but I'm going to put 260 rental units from 6th grade math. I think that was a great way to put it. I love that you don't have to be using algebra, calculus, anything fancy. It is literally that add, subtract, divide, multiply. How do you get your cash flow calculation? It is not easy, but it's fairly simple.
But the thing though, Dion, is unfortunately a lot of the people out there, they're not proficient at that math level. So, but it's not hard to get there.
So that will give me the last question to close the video with. Do you and your wife self-manage or have property management?
We self-manage. Yeah, we self-manage. Our properties are all in our area where we work, where we live. Bought a lot of properties that have been property managed properties. And it's pretty tough to hire a property manager when I know how they manage those properties by me purchasing them. I could tell you some horror stories.
Well, maybe we'll come back in a video and tell some of those war stories. And I know that in our next video, one of my questions is going to be, because I'm actually curious about this myself, with 260 rental units, investing since 2003, 2004. And don't answer this now, but this is for a future video. What does retirement look like for you and your wife? That will be the follow-up question. And Bob, if anybody has questions, because I guarantee they're going to, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
I can be reached by email at bobgeorgemiller@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. I hope that you will be motivation for a lot of people who are watching this video. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.